All right, so hey everyone, this is Adam, the tent guy. I'm here with Steve Arndt from Teeco Solutions, otherwise known as Teeco Steve. Hi, Steve.
Hey, how are you, Adam? Thanks for having me today.
I'm good. Thanks for being on. So you're with Teeco Solutions, but before that, you were in the rental business. So why don't you give an introduction and kind of background about yourself?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, back in 1997, I actually got into this industry in the rental business. Had no intention of, anything to do with cleaning or washing at all. I had been married for, I guess, about 6 years, something like that. And about that time, we had three young boys, so a young family. And I made the step to leave the corporate world and scratch start a tent rental business here in St. Louis. It was a very exciting time. The tent rental business is a great business to start because it's all depends on your own labor and your own effort to get moving. And you can do it out of a garage or a barn, and that's exactly what I did. Out of my father's barn. That's how I got started. And it was an exciting time. We in 1997 we started. We started in April. Went down to the ARA show and bought a bunch of tents. Didn't necessarily know what we were doing at that point, but we actually had a profitable first year, which is a big thing in the startup world. Um, and we worked really hard, my wife and I. And 3 years later, we had grown super fast. We owned probably four or five trucks. We owned a building. We had a good crew of people running around. So we were doing really, really good, 3 years in by all stretches of the imaginations. On the accounting side of things, it was good. The assets were growing. Certainly couldn't buy equipment fast enough. Um, but really woke up after 3 years and there was a problem. And it had nothing to do with, the health of the business. It really had more to do with the health of me. And because I realized that, as to keep up with this rapid growth, I had no extra time for my children, my family, or friends. I was coming home late at night, leaving early in the morning. But that started really kind of weighing on me personally, our marriage and our family. I also didn't have any extra cash for anything outside of the business. We were making good cash. Excess cash was fine, but as anybody who's ever scratch started a rental business or a tent rental business, they know that cash has to go right back into the business. In order to keep up, you're buying more tents or equipment or whatever to keep up with the growth. So all our extra cash went to the business. And my answer to that was just to keep running faster and faster, put longer hours in, work harder, hire more people, buy more stuff. But 3 years in, I call that the hamster wheel. It was going pretty fast, and I was pretty tired of running that fast. And it was taking tolls that I really had to say, do I want to do this anymore? And when I sat down with a profit and loss, and we were a sole proprietor at that point. So the bottom line was really more or less my paycheck. That was the amount of money that was available to me to either reinvest in the business or, pay myself or, invest some in my family and time with my friends. So I wasn't happy with that bottom line because at the end of the day, although it was a big number, I took the amount of hours that I was working divided by that number, and I realized that I could go work for somebody else for this number per hour, and not have the headaches of a bank loan, employee payroll to make, whether or not wondering whether or not we're going to have a good year next year, people are going to renew and come back with us, all those type of things of owning a business. I thought, well, I can just fold it up right now and go work for somebody else and make the same money, a lot less headaches. That looked pretty appealing at that point. Um, but I still had the flame. I still enjoyed being an entrepreneur, still enjoyed the growth. But these other problems crept in. So selling the business was certainly on the radar. But as I stopped and took a moment and got some other mentors around, which was the first time I'd ever really done that, they also started pointing out that, you could slow the growth of that business up a little bit and focus on becoming more profitable. So, don't chase growth, but just chase profitability. And so when they started helping me understand that, the only way in this business to chase profitability was to become more efficient.
Right.
And I started to look at that. My starting point for doing that was in the books, the financial books and profit and loss, my balance sheet. And to be honest with you, I had taken accounting classes in that in school, in high school and later, but they never really meant much to me until this point.
Right.
You know, when I started looking at my numbers, understanding how it affected my pocketbook and my family, it became crystal clear. And I took it a step further and I started pulling it apart. I learned about things called variable cost as opposed to fixed cost and how that affected my bottom line. And when I was able to change my variable cost and make those less, how that affected my bottom line, how it disproportionately affected my bottom line. It wasn't saving a dollar, drop the dollar to the bottom line. If I could change my efficiencies and save a dollar every time we did that particular thing, drive a stake in the ground, clean a tent, drive a truck, clean a truck, whatever it was, it actually in the course of a year probably meant $5 or $6 to the bottom line for me. You
Right.
know,
What were
and
some
that
of
was a
those
huge thing for me.
what were some of
What,
those variable costs?
wow. What I did in order to get there, to get a little backstory about that, I literally would go. I would go to a job site. I would hide in the woods so the guys wouldn't see me because they acted differently when I was there as the boss.
Right.
And I would just start timing them. Like, how long does it take to drive a stake in the ground? How long does it take to pull a stake? How long does it take to unload the truck? So everything in the field was driving stakes, pulling stakes, variable cost. Unloading the truck and getting those stakes placed was variable cost. Anything to do with every little thing out there, broke it down at that level. And I know Scott Woodruff and the Tent Ox is doing some great work around that, but it has to do with that. When I looked at other variable costs in the business, I realized that when we were our really busy time, I realized that we could be really productive for 14 days. And at that 15th day, these guys just putting 10, 12-hour days in, they were just tired and our mistakes went through the ceiling.
Right.
And every time we had a mistake, it really kind of meant that a customer was calling us and we had to go back out and fix whatever the issue was you know and that was costing us a lot. It was a huge variable cost. So that kind of 15-day wall where my guys just hit it and the wheels fell off our business, that was a huge variable cost. So I had to back into that and start doing things like when my crews that were setup crews came home back at the office, if they started really early in the morning, they'd be back about 3, send them home. And I would bring another crew in the afternoon to load the trucks, get the trucks cleaned, get the trucks filled up full of gas so that when those guys came in the next morning, they're ready to go and they had everything they needed. But most importantly, they're rested.
Right.
So variable cost around kind of this 15-day mark. And then obviously the big variable cost for me that led me to the business I am now was cleaning tents. I was completely surprised at what that was costing me when I broke it down. You know, it was costing me in my capital costs. So the extra dollars that I created throughout the year, I had to go buy extra tents to keep up with my growth. It was costing me there because I wasn't turning my tents fast enough. I had a pile of dirty tents in my busy time that I didn't use, and I would go grab a brand new one off the shelf just to keep up in busy time.
Right.
But huge variable cost there. Huge variable cost in going back and cleaning a tent top that somebody wasn't satisfied with. And then a huge variable cost and just my guys, they were tired. They hated to do that work, and they weren't giving me the quality that I needed in my busy time, and they were going extremely slow. So I was really surprised at how much cleaning during my busy time was costing me in a variable sense.
Right. Yeah, cleaning sucks. No one likes doing it. I have some employees that won't come in during cleaning time. They just hate it. But when I first began my business, I was trying to find resources and I signed up for a newsletter that you guys did. It came through email. And it was like one of the first few weeks of me starting my business. And the first one I got from you was it basically said you can work harder and buy more stuff and work longer hours to make more money, or you can become more efficient to gain more profit from what you're already doing. And it was just luck that I signed up at that time and got that first one because that has influenced my decision making going forward. Whenever I had extra money to buy things, I would evaluate, do I buy the new tent or do I buy the stake puller? And usually it's let's buy the steak puller because I can pull steaks faster. Now we got a half hour every day to do something else or just go home. And then after the steak puller, it's the steak driver. Now we've got an hour every day to do something else or go home. And then various carts and then putting things on wheels. And then over time, all these efficiencies add up to like 2 hours a day that you got extra that either guys aren't getting tired or now you can do a few extra jobs every day.
That's huge. I mean, the people that run their businesses like that and always thinking about that, those are the people that grow soundly, they grow healthily, and those are the people that can survive the downturns and the upturns. They're just poised. Their business is a really healthy business.
I like what you said earlier. Don't chase growth, chase profitability, and
Absolutely.
that's very insightful. Never thought of it that way. But yeah, efficiency is the way to become
Yeah.
more profitable. Are you guys still doing your newsletter?
We put it on pause for a minute. We're regrouping, and we're going to reintroduce that here in a few months.
Right.
You know, Yeah, but I'm absolutely, I love cleaning and all that. But my biggest passion is the topic that we're talking about. I love having these conversations with other people in the tent world, um, just because it changes lives. It really, really does. I'm
Right.
passionate about, making money for me is secondary. But if you take a look at the mission of my business, of Teeco, it's better life for better business and better business for better life. That's really where my passion stands because I believe as an entrepreneur, we can show up to work every day and we're in really good space because we had a better life. And then we leave at the end of the day in good space to come back and feed that life, whether it's at home or marriage or whatever your situation is, that circle just goes around and around and it'll get better and better. But if you come home and you don't have an efficient business and it's not running well and you're constantly crabby to those around you, your friends, your spouse, your kids, you're not going to show up the next day in a good space either. So to me, it's all, as an entrepreneur, it's related. Life is not a box. You don't have a family box and a business box. My friends that are in corporations, they can do that. We can't.
Right.
So they're all connected, and I'm passionate about that.
Right. I've gotten to a point where a lot of rental companies they just go 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 go, and the balance goes out the window. Um, I've gotten to a point where I could grow a little more, but it's going to be a lot more time or maybe a lot more employees. But like for the amount of money I'm making, where I'm at, the amount of work we're able to do, give people 40 hours a week and sometimes even more than that. Uh, I'm good with that. I don't want to like just go after the growth and then not be able to be home or just always be tired. So it's like it's a struggle because a lot of people they can see that they can make another $100,000 next year, but what's that going to cost? So I'm at a point where I'm like, I'm good. Everything's good. I make a lot of money. Everyone's fed and paid, and my family sees me and stuff. So it's a struggle for some people. They just want to keep getting bigger and bigger, but you don't always need to.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the mistake that I made when I first started my rental business was a mistake I see very common in other tent rental. You know, doing what you did. In essence, before you started to grow or in the middle of growing, you started your business. Define what your business is all about. What do you want out of this business? So you decided, hey, this life balance is good for me. I'm going to run this business to feed my life. And that's, you made that and you stuck that in the sand that this is it. And there are other people who say, you know what, I want to become as profitable and produce as much cash as I can. That's a great place too. But either way, decide which one you're going to be and show up at work every day to do that. But
Right.
if you
Good point.
don't define that and you're trying to run it for cash and produce a bunch of profits and become big, but really what lights your fire is to be with your family and have a life balance. You're just constantly showing up every day and trying to climb the wrong hill. Your ladder is against the wrong wall. You're climbing the wrong wall.
Right. Life balance is important. And there's some people who maybe they're not married or have kids and they just want to go, 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 go. But
Absolutely.
everyone's situation is a little different. I have a wife and a kid. I want to be home a little bit more. I got in lots of fights during when I was in growth. I never see you. And I was like, well, you knew what you're getting into. And she's like, oh, no, I didn't. Uh, but now my life's a lot more balanced. So it's
Yeah.
good. Um, so you've been through this, and I've from that newsletter, I learned a lot, even though it didn't tell me specific things. It was just be efficient. So what are some efficiency tips, that you have for people? Maybe walk us through, like, starting in the morning on the job, what you do at the end of the day, even though you said you have a different crew come in at the end of the day. What are some things that saved you minutes to half hour to an hour every day?
I know that when I had the rental business and really kind of dove into this, some pretty simple stuff, and one of them I already alluded to. I would just pay attention to the really close attention to that 15 wall day. 15th day, my guys were just so tired that they started making mistakes. The morale was way down. So it meant to me that, let's try to get every day that they're working in the business, during the busy time, such that the morale is up and they don't get so freaking tired, So one of the easiest things that I did was to bring a second shift in, you know, during that busy time. So my trucks would leave, I would get my guys out earlier in the morning. It would do a couple things. They would beat the rush hour traffic. In St. Louis, we do have a little bit of traffic, but if I could get to the job site before before the traffic started, they weren't stuck in traffic as much,
Right.
so that was pretty big. So start a little bit earlier. Then on the bigger jobs, I actually had some of my guys show up at the job site. So I'd start paying them at the job site.
Mm,
St. Louis is an area where we can get around. You can usually get anywhere in St. Louis within 15 or 20 minutes. It's different than if you're like in a city like New York or Boston or something like that. This might not work, but most cities are like St. Louis. They'll show up at the job site, so that way I'm not paying you to drive from the shop to the job site and then back. So that was a big one. It really only worked for bigger jobs. The smaller jobs it was hard because then they had to follow the
right.
truck the rest of the day.
So if they're going to be there all day, there's a crew that already packed the truck the night before, so you don't need them to come in to pack the truck. Some people take off with the truck, and then the other people just meet them there, do the job for the day, and then go home. That's genius. I like that.
Yeah, pretty simple. Pretty simple to do. Of course, we talked about all the stake driving and just getting really efficient at the job sites. And Scott Woodruff at Tent Ox has done a marvelous job with really kind of drilling every task on the job site. I think that's imperative. You're going to spend one guy's salary to buy equipment, but you got that piece of equipment for 5 to 10 years, and it doesn't cost you any more. I think that's huge.
Right. Yeah. Everything
Getting
on the
that truck back though, getting that truck back at kind of that middle of the afternoon, 3 or 4 o'clock, and then you're bringing that second crew in at kind of 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Those guys go home. They go home, they have a nice dinner, they rest, whatever, so they're ready to go again. But that second crew is important. What I did was I kept one person who knew the whole business, so a manager type around. He would come in at 3 or 4, so he could manage. But I could hire people who really didn't know the ins and outs. A bunch of college kids at that point. They would unload the truck, they would reload the truck, they would make sure the trucks were clean. So I bought a pressure washer and some brushes. I wanted to maintain a good, clean looking company. But that was really the last thing we got done when it was busy. But that's
right.
exactly what everybody was looking for our rolling billboards. I want to make sure they were clean. It didn't cost me much to have a college kid out there with a scrub brush and clean them every other day.
Right.
The other thing that I did was at the time we could store in St. Louis 500 gallons of diesel fuel above ground. And a guy would come by once a week and top that off no matter how much I did or didn't use. And the cost was not a whole lot per gallon more than I was paying at the pump. So I just, rather than trying to, say, well, fill them up when they're only half full or whatever, every day they filled them up to the top. I don't care how much fuel was used. That way I knew when that truck left out of there, the fuel was full. The reason I did that was because I realized that I would send a truck out full of, how many people would fit in the cab. Their first stop was at the gas station.
Right.
And they always told me it was to get fuel. But I sat there and watched them from afar and started timing it. If you put 4 guys in a truck and they're there for 15 minutes, that's 1 hour of pay
Yeah.
just so they could fill the truck up.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
But really what they were getting was sodas and all that. So I actually started having the guys in the evening we'd ice down a chest full of sodas. So they really didn't have an excuse to stop anymore. Yeah, and they actually felt good about the fact that we bought the sodas.
Right. Yeah, it's perfect. Nowadays, there is companies that will come and just fill up your trucks every night. Like my friend out in Rochester, he's got a fleet of trucks, and every night there's just a fuel company that comes and fills up every truck. That might be because we're not allowed to keep that much diesel above ground, but there's that resource for people now too.
It's well worth it.
Yeah.
I know today too, the diesel is always a big contention because people are switching over to gas trucks. So that what you're talking about would work better too if they'll come and do gas. I don't know if they will or won't.
Right.
Um, but sometimes the gas trucks are more reliable just because of what we're
Now
doing.
today, if you've got diesel, you got to have DEF fluid in it, and that eats a lot of time. Someone's got to stop to buy one container of DEF fluid at a gas station or whatever. So we're just buying 55-gallon drums of it, putting it up on a loading dock so that the gravity can feed it into the truck
Yeah,
and keep
yeah,
people from having to go to the gas. The gas stations suck. People spend way too much time. They jump in line and get a sub, and then they're there for 15 minutes, half hour because they got to eat. Obviously, they got to eat, but it eats a lot of
yeah,
time.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. The other thing by having a different crew load the truck, my loading got a lot more accurate. There was nothing worse than sending a crew out who was, 20 minutes away and they got to a spot where they realized they forgot a piece. But most importantly, the job couldn't go forward without it because they kind of worked
Right.
themselves into a corner. They didn't know they didn't have it until it was too late. So often I would have somebody, okay, run the part out, or a guy drop off the jet and come back and get it and go back. Well, productivity and while that was being delivered went way down, because they couldn't
Yeah.
move forward. So that loading of the truck accurate was important, but my guys were tired and they were making mistakes. So having one person as a manager who knew how to get trucks loaded correctly and a process around that to be able to direct the people who didn't necessarily know was important.
Right. Yeah. Not having someone on the truck kills a day and kills a lot of money. Um, I mean, that still happens with us. We got a checklist that we go through and everything, but sometimes something forgets to be put on. So we've just been calling Uber and we throw it in the back seat and say, bring this to this place. And it saves an employee having to go out. It costs a little bit. I don't know if it costs less or more, but sometimes it's more convenient to have that Uber driver come pick up that thing and bring it to the job site.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
all right, so let's get into tent washing. I don't own a tent washer. We do most of it by hand, and I have a friend who owns a tent washer who will clean my things. Uh, so when you had your company, you were doing things by hand mostly, and that sucks, right? It takes a long time.
Right.
And so, did you end up buying a tent washer from someone before you started your tent washing company?
Actually, we didn't. I looked at buying one because I definitely, but what I found was at the time, I'm going back, 22 years ago now. At the time, there really wasn't anything designed for this. So I was having to buy something that was manufactured for the linen world, and it was rather expensive. And the reason it was expensive was because it had a lot of features that we would never use,
Right,
like a spin cycle. That's a really expensive feature to manufacture, and it had a lot of computer controls for complicated soap systems. So if I was going to buy anything at that point, I was having to buy one of those, and I thought, why would I buy like a Lamborghini when I really only needed a pickup truck?
right,
Very basic pickup truck. So at that point, we actually rebuilt. We found a machine from a hospital like the 1950s, a super basic one. It was completely rotten, but I was lucky because we also in a family business, we had a full fabrication and machine shop that could design any kind of machine we needed. So I worked with those guys and rebuilt one of those old machines. And that was really our first washing machine. We had that for about 6 months. Somebody bought it from us, and we realized we needed a bigger one. And that's really we were developed the very first one, very specific to what we were doing in our world. Spent a lot of time trying to understand how to safely wash them. Not to spin the thing too fast. What's the right temperature? What's the right chemicals? What's the right fin configuration? So that's kind of how we got into it. It was a blessing to have the family business on the other side of things. I grew up building stuff, mechanicals. I raced cars, raced motorcycles. demolition derby. So I was a gearhead, growing up. So I had that background. So it really helped.
Right. I tried doing a poor man's tent washer recently where I bought a barrel um mixer to mix 55-gallon barrels, and I put a 20 wide in there, but it kind of just didn't move. I got to put some fins in there. It'll only do it'll only do up to a 20 by 20 and some sides, but it was my attempt. But the problem was that the material inside didn't move. It just sat there.
Yeah. I saw that and it was great. I think, all the stuff you were talking about, you were nailing all the issues that are involved that you had to address, and I smiled because I thought that was us 22 years ago,
Right.
just doing exactly that. You're just in there trying and, figuring out what works, what don't work, and go at it.
Right. Yeah, so let's get into the tent washers.
Yeah.
Like
But
what do they do? Like how amazing are they?
Well, I obviously take this opportunity to talk about amazing tent washers. It's my passion. But I might back up and just say, you
Okay.
know what? Not everybody's a candidate for tent washer.
Right.
So, if you're still hand washing, there are some big efficiencies that you can do. It doesn't cost you a lot of money. It's going to cost you a little bit of time. And if you're willing to learn, you can gain a lot,
Yeah, that's a
So I'm
very
going to take a minute to kind of talk about efficiencies for hand washing.
yeah, definitely. That's a very good point because me myself, I'm not even a candidate for a tent washer at this point. Everything's got to be done by hand. So yeah, if I can learn different ways to do things by hand, that would be great as well as everyone who's watching. Most of the people watching are smaller, just starting out, same boat as me. They're not a candidate. So yeah, what are some of
Yeah.
those tips for
Yeah.
hand washing?
I would say first off, understand why you want to improve your hand washing, right? Focus on your turnarounds during your busy time. If you can get those tents out of that dirty pile faster, get them back out. The tent comes in, it's all muddy on Tuesday, get it back out on Wednesday or Thursday, turn around. You're gonna have a lot better use of your inventory, right?
Right.
Um, Focus on the least amount of labor costs, or drive that labor cost down, and focus on getting the highest quality of clean that you can get. Make that customer happy. So here's what you can do with the systems you already have. The biggest mistake I see people make, they don't spend any time understanding their chemicals. They'll call up their buddy and say, "What are you using?" or "What's being used mostly in the industry? That's what I'm going to use," and they don't go any further. You know, and it cleans, it does, but understanding that, I'm in St. Louis, so a chemical that might work really good for me, Adam, might not work good for you. Because I've got a certain amount of industry here, a certain amount of pollution, a certain amount of traffic, a different kind of soil than you have. I have a clay soil here. You may not have that. Those are all things that get my tent dirty. So when I discover something that works really good for cleaning my soils, it might not work as good for you, you
Okay.
know? So taking the time to test a variety of different type of cleaning chemicals for the soils that you have in your area, the soils that you're experiencing is huge. And it really doesn't take much, it'll take you about a better part of a day to do the testing, but it's pretty simple. You just buy like 3 or 4 different tent cleaning chemicals. You dilute them out in 2 or 3 different dilution ratios. You take a tent that's got the same dirt on it, and you take a scrub brush and you go back and forth 10 times with each chemical at each different dilution ratio, and you look at it and say, which one's the cleanest? By doing the scrub back and forth 10 times, it's the same amount of work all the way across,
Right.
right? By doing the same dirt, taking the same tent, it's the same dirt. The only variable is what kind of chemical. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so focusing on finding the right chemical for you. Not only to get your tents clean as they can, but having the right chemical means that you're going to scrub like back and forth. There's a muscle involved in this, right? You're paying for somebody to do that. They get tired doing it. They don't want to do it. All those things mean that they're not going to do it fast for you, and they're not going to get the quality that you need. So the chemical that requires the least amount of scrubbing and gets you the quality that you want is going to be the chemical that's right for you.
Right.
So take the time that for research and get it. It might mean it's a more expensive chemical, but pit that up against the labor savings that you got, and you're going to find out real quick that spending an extra $5 or $10 for more expensive chemical is well worth it. But at the same token, you might find it's a cheaper chemical than you're using. You
Right.
won't know till you try.
Good
You
point.
know, you absolutely won't. So chemicals is the number one thing. Take the time, have an open mind, have a mind of learning, and go down that road. Well, it just takes you half a day of your time, a day of your time. The
Right.
other thing that I see, I still saw people washing their tents with a brush. So they're using some sort of a broom or a brush attached to a stick or something, some rags or whatever, and they're doing this by hand. You know, it's the human element that you're paying. You're paying that labor to make that rag go around in circles or to make that brush go back and forth. Get rid of those for the most part, right? At least the very structure mechanization right there. It's not going to be a tent washer. At the very least, if you're a small guy, spend $300 or $400 on a polisher, a 7-inch polisher that the guys use to polish cars. You know, it's a dual action polisher that you can turn the RPMs way down on. There's a pad that goes right on. You just stick it on there.
You talking about one of the hand ones?
Yes,
Okay.
you know, it looks like a big grinder the guy used to grind steel on, but it's not that. This grinders go way too fast.
Right.
You
Okay.
know, it costs you $300 or $400 for a good one. You'll have it for many, many years. If you're going to wash your tents on a table, you just bring it up on the table, you squirt your chemical on there, and you use this polisher, this dual action the polisher they use for cars. It saves you from using your muscle going back and forth. You
Right.
get it done a lot faster. You know, the very bare minimum, spend $300 or $400 with that. You can save yourself a lot. If you want to take it to the next level, and you're going to clean tents on the floor, buy yourself a floor polisher. You know, the ones that you see guys cleaning the floors up all the time. They come in different diameters. You know, 13-inch, 15, 20, whatever. But then if you clean on the floor, it's the same idea. Don't be paying somebody to muscle through that. Those things cost between $800 and $1,200 depending on what you get. But it's very much worth that investment.
Right.
I wouldn't pay anybody any more to hand clean with a brush. You know.
Now, after you polish it on the floor, what do? Hang it up and spray it, or bring it outside on a ramp and spray it, or
You know, you bring a good point up there in your question. Everybody's got a different building. You know,
right,
different. Some guys got really cool ramps that they can put it on. Some guys got really great spaces they can hang up and hang up in the building and spray, so the water hits the floor and it goes away. But not everybody's got the same setup. Some guys meant to hang it up outside, right? But you do have, once you clean that, you put the chemical on there and you have, cleaned it in whatever method there. It is really important that you remove all the chemicals. So that rinsing process you're talking about is super important. It's a big, big thing that I see happening in our world where people don't rinse it because a lot of times you can't see it. It looks clean, right?
right,
But the chemicals are still in the threads of the stitching where that webbing is sewn on. And then 9 months later, you guys are pulling on that webbing and the stitching gives way. And you don't remember that you didn't rinse it out because you didn't know, right?
right,
So having some sort of ramp where you're at least a ramp or some sort of slope where you start rinsing that and that water drains off is big. I like anybody that can get a large volume of water to do it at that point because you're flushing the heck out of it. Or hanging it's awesome too because obviously it all falls off at that point, you know. But trying to make sure that you get every square inch completely rinsed is important. You know?
right. Yeah, I'm thinking I have a ramp outside my building. I can do like 20 wides, but I'm thinking of installing some posts with some winches to get it up in the air, spray it, and then it can also dry there as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the other things that I think that can really help people that's very commonly overlooked. You know, if you're most guys are doing something on the floor. They got a floor polisher, they're doing it by hand or whatever. So they're laying their tent out on the floor and they're doing this thing. Having a very smooth surface that you clean on, like smooth like my desk, my laminate on my desk, that smooth makes a
Right,
big difference. A lot of times I'll see guys spread this out on a floor that's an older concrete floor, it's a bit chipped up, or maybe the finish on the concrete is what we call a brushed finish. So when that concrete was being set when it originally laid, somebody took a broom and they just drug it across it. So these little grooves all in there, and we're washing our tent on there. And what you find is, whether you're doing a floor polisher or a Russell, there's still this kind of sense that this is, if my hand here is the tent top, and these are the bristles or the pad on the floor polisher, they've got to come in there and they've got to dig out, if you will, the dirt out of those little crevices in the tent. But if the tent falls down into that groove in your concrete floor, that brush can't get down in there, or that
Right.
pad can't get down in there. Now I'm talking at a level that we have to see at a magnifying glass, but over the course of the whole tent, if you're not getting all those little specks out of there, you're not getting as clean as you could.
Right.
And you're working a little hard to get that brush down in there. So having a very smooth surface, however you get there, is key in increasing your efficiencies.
Also make sure that there's no stones or anything on there, because you go over that with the floor polisher, it can like either tear up the tent a little bit or create like little indentations or marks on the tent that suck as well.
Does that immediately. I mean,
Right.
immediately. And you won't know it until we put up and see the starlight, a
Right.
lot of times. If it's not a really big hole that comes through there. A lot of guys will use drop cloths. I'm not a fan of I understand why you have to use a drop cloth if you got a dirty floor. But if you don't have to use a drop cloth, don't. And you got a really good smooth floor. I know a lot of companies out there, they'll have a pressure washer where they're just constantly cleaning that floor. Every time they pull a tent up there, and they're wearing little booties, so they're not tracking the dirt, onto that floor. And those
Right.
booties are only designed to be worn in the tent washing facility.
Right. Another point on pressure washers is so when we were doing our 40 wides, it was in my yard where it had a little bit of slope, and then we would pressure wash the dirty water off. You don't want to pick too high of a nozzle on the pressure washer and get too close, because you're going to rip off the protective coat on the vinyl, or you're just going to rip up the tent. So
Yeah.
stay back a little bit, pick the right nozzle. Don't go the red nozzle, the one that blasts the highest. Go yellow or something that moves the water, but not at extremely high pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll talk about one more thing, and then I'll move on to the washing machines and cover that. Um, and you talked about it a minute ago, Adam. Washing a tent's one thing, but drying a tent is equally important.
Right.
And one of the things that I see about drying the tent, that can be a major clog in our busy times for turning these tents. But if you're talking about a small company versus a big company, there's something a small company has that a bigger company doesn't. A small company has the ability to control their inventory and know what's going out the next day much more tightly than a larger company.
Right.
The bigger you get, you tend to lose control of that because you just can't keep track of it all. So much stuff's coming and going. But a smaller company, they're limited in their drying because typically they don't have a really big building. They can't afford that. They can't afford that building, to hang with tall ceilings to hang their stuff up. So I really encourage people to change their thinking, if they're a smaller company especially, on their smaller tents, 10 bys, 15, 20s, maybe the 30 bys even. If you can get those washed and maybe just get them hung enough to get the big drops off, and which only takes like a half an hour sometimes, hang them up and hit them real quick, and fold them up wet, and get in the habit of putting them up wet. If it's a frame tent, pole tents are a little tougher to do that with. But just, it's a little more cumbersome in the field to deal with that. Again, it's going to cost you there, but you're not clogging up your small space. You're not taking up the aisleways in your building. And so I think the efficiencies that you save during your busy time by just sending them out a little damp or wet can surpass the inefficiencies of dealing with the wet tent in the field.
Right. We've done that a lot. We would clean a 40 wide at the beginning of the season, the day before it's first going up. So we'd clean it, put it back in the bag, and then put it up the next day, and then it dries while it's up. And hopefully it comes back down wet, or down dry, not wet. But
kiss of death for wet, right?
Yeah. And me being a little smaller, I mean, I'm what you would call medium size, or what I would call medium size. So it doesn't always work out, but if the tent comes down on Monday or Tuesday wet, I'm pretty confident I can get that back out on Thursday or Friday again. If not, then we have to lay it out or hang it or something. But being a little smaller allows me to get wet tents and get them back up without having to deal with hang in that tent and spend a lot of time doing that. It just comes in and then goes back out a few days later.
Yeah, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah. So just leveraging. If you're a small person, you can leverage a lot of great things. The bigger guys can't. So
Right. All right. So I guess that leads us naturally into the tent washer. So you're at a certain point, you got a whole bunch of tents. They got to be cleaned, but to do it by hand would just take way too long. So at that point, a tent washer comes in, and
yeah,
that's where you come in.
absolutely, absolutely. So as I grew my company, I got to that spot, where it was just too costly. I couldn't keep up during my busy time, and so forth. It's to the point now, kind of 20 plus years later, that anybody spending more than 8 hours washing their tents a week is a candidate for a washer.
Okay.
Things have progressed in the technology, the washing machines, the way they're getting built, the amount that are getting built per year, that the efficiencies and the cost of that is really kind of come down. So it can make sense for anybody who spends at least 8 hours hand washing to look into a washing machine. Um, and the washing machine, it does a number of things for you when you put it into your shop. It will guarantee you as the manager or owner your turnaround times. Because there's basically three levels of dirt. It's got dust on it, which is not really dirty, or it's got a little bit of mud, or it's like super gray, something that's been up all season. But no matter which level it is, you can look at it and say, well, that lighter dirt's going to take me 20 minutes. That heavier, super dirty is going to take me like an hour and a half. The key is what the turnaround time is. So in your really busy time, if it's Tuesday or Wednesday and you're looking at a big pile of tents there, you should generally know what kind of square footage is sitting there. You know about what your washing machine can do per hour. So you should know by like what time of day all that'll be clean. You never were able to gauge that when you were washing by hand, you
Right.
know. So it makes the management job a lot easier. You know that you can turn that inventory a lot faster. It guaranteed a level of clean. No longer are you relying on somebody's morale, how they feel that day to get your tents clean. You put it in the washing machine, you select one cycle, whatever it is, and you know it's going to come out as clean as it was a week earlier.
Right.
So you're not worried about level of clean anymore. That just goes away. Um, your morale of your employees goes way up because you hinted at it earlier, Adam. When you talk about, hey, guys, it's time to clean tents, they run for the hills. They hate it.
Right.
Probably the worst job in the whole business. You know, so now that you've given them a tool that they can actually have success with and not scrub as much. They can look you square in the eye and say, "Hey, boss, I can get this done. I'll get it done in an hour, and it'll be super clean." So that you can give them a tool that they can experience success with, which is huge.
Right.
They like to do a good job for you, so their morale's going to go up.
Also, from a morale point of view, if a crew ever has to show up with a dirty tent and put that up, and the customer yells at them, and they have to be embarrassed every time they're going out to set up a tent, that's not good. They just don't like going out anymore. They don't want to deal with all those complaints of this is a dirty tent. So you take that off the table when either they're doing it by hand or with a washer. If you're sending crews out with clean tents, it helps morale, even though they may not know it. If your stuff's always clean, but if they ever experience putting up a dirty tent versus a clean tent, they'll know the difference.
That's absolutely true. That leads me to my other thing. When I was looking at the efficiencies of my tent rental company, inevitably I would get a call at about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon after we're kind of winding down, and the customers had just been, getting their party set up, and they were screaming about a dirty tent. Well, the cost for me to take a very tired crew, put a rag in their hand, and put them in a truck and go back out there, very often I lost like most of the profit on that job. You
Right.
know, and the customer's not happy anyway. So nobody's happy there. I didn't make any money. The employee hates to go back out on a Friday. They want to go out and enjoy their weekend, and the customer's not happy. So it's a lose lose all the way around. But having a washing machine, I know it's clean. As long as it went through this process, it's a done time.
Right.
And I also know that as a manager owner during my busy time, there were a lot of other fires in my business. We had flat tires, we had people didn't show up, we had trucks loaded wrong, and just taking the whole cleaning thing out of it, it made my job a lot easier. didn't have to
Right.
worry about it anymore.
Less
So
headache.
management is a lot easier that way.
Right. Um, for people who haven't seen a tent washer, because a lot of people don't know that a tent washer exists or what it is, you can't even contemplate what it is. Why don't you get into the mechanics of it? And I'll throw up a video while you're talking about it, because
Yeah.
they're pretty impressive machines. They're huge. Some of them are huge. Some of them people can stand in them. So to kind of just give a overview of the mechanics and how it works.
Yes, and I kind of go back to when we developed the thing. When you have a washing machine, it's not like washing your tents or your sheets or washing hospital sheets, that kind of stuff. You have a big old piece of material that's hard and heavy to lift, right? So the first thing you need is a very big door opening, just a practical thing. A bigger door opening than you would have on a linen machine. So getting it in and out through a big door opening, that's the first thing. Once it's in there, then you want to be able to safely wash it, right? We want to get it as clean as possible, but it can't come out and have a bunch of pinholes in it. It can't be delaminated, scuffed up. We want to have this tent around for 7, 10, 12 years, in the best condition it can be in. So the mechanics of the way the drum rolls around is important. If you watch a tent washing machine and compare it to a commercial washing machine that washes linens, the RPMs on how fast it goes around are a lot slower on a tent washing machine, because we don't want to throw that big old piece of material around in that drum violently. You know, uh, it's actually the material that we use is often a laminate or a coated vinyl fabric, and laminates especially are a lot more delicate than like my shirt would be.
Right.
So we have to tunnel them a lot slower. You know, the other thing that was very important is the temperature of the water. If you take that temperature of the water and you wash it in what temperatures that you normally wash linens or shirts in, you are definitely going to ruin that tent. It'll have a bunch of pinholes in it. Or if you go too cold, washing in too cold of water are equally important. Rinsing in too cold of water, you're going to get pinholes in that, because what happens is that tent gets really stiff. Think about putting a tent up on a 50-degree day or 60-degree day as opposed to putting a tent up on a 100-degree day.
Right.
100 degrees is a lot more pliable. So if that tent's sitting in cold water, it's real stiff and it's not going to move around in that drum, and it's going to rub up against that stainless steel drum and going to rub a hole in it. As opposed to using 100-degree water where you really kind of need to be on wash and all your rinses and making sure that you've got a system that can consistently deliver that nice warm water every time you fill it, whether you're washing or rinsing, is super important. And then selecting the right chemicals for washing. I was talking to a guy yesterday who's had one of my washers for gosh, over 15 years, and he was telling me he found a chemical that worked really good in the wash machine, cleaned it, and about 6 months later, all the stitching on about $15,000 worth of his tops just gave way. It just ate it away.
Right.
And after about 3 or 4 washings, he identified it was the chemical that great results, but the chemical was too aggressive for the stitching and the webbing, and he ruined a bunch of tents. Quick way to do it, to just use the wrong chemical. So make sure you're using the right chemical.
On chemicals, that's a very important point because we're talking about using the right chemicals, whether hand washing or machine washing. I'm assuming you sell a whole bunch of different chemicals.
We do.
Okay.
We do. We've got
So
chemicals for hand washing, chemicals, when you're looking at hand washing, you're going to have a whole arsenal of chemicals out there, for just your general cleaning, what I talked about earlier, doing that test on. But you're going to have chemicals to wash, you got tar and tape, anything sticky, that's a whole different kind of solvent. And when you use solvents, you got to be very careful that you don't take the plasticizers out. So you got to make sure you got the right solvent. So even when they accidentally leave a residue on there, it's not going to create a yellow spot. So we have chemicals for all that. Tents that you have in your inventory that are gray, just over time, you got tents that have been hand washing for 5 years, and they just build this gray that you can't get off anymore. That's a very special chemical, but you can get that gray off of there pretty easily.
okay.
It's a product we have called dry wash. But depending on what you're doing, yeah, mold is a different thing. Preserving yourself from mold. So you're going to end up with a whole arsenal if you're washing by hand, especially with chemicals. And we also have a chemical that works specifically with the washing machine. It gets the deeper stuff off. It's safe on all the threading, safe on all the webbing, of course, safe on the vinyl. So
Right. So people can call you guys up and say, "Hey, I'm up in upstate New York, and you guys might
yeah,
know some chemicals to suggest to them to try out."
yes,
Good.
absolutely, absolutely. And we're one of the things that we're doing right now is our online store is up and running. We're doing a lot of how-to videos about how to wash, how to select chemicals, a lot of stuff that we talked about here. But in the next 6 months, you'll see a very robust offering on our website having to do with all that.
Right. And you
We won't
guys
be able
got
to
some of
right
those.
now.
You guys got some of those videos on YouTube too, right?
We've got some of them on there right now, but it's an initiative for us the next 2 months to really do a lot more. So
Okay. Yeah, I'll link that in the description. I watched the one video of where you put tape on a tent and then you use your dry chemical and clean off the
yeah,
tent and then take the tape off and can see a big difference. Uh,
yes.
and that dry chemical is cool because what we're talking about, wet tents, is no good. So if you need to spot clean something or clean a whole tent, but it's not going out for a few days, you can use that dry chemical.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really designed for that gray stain we talked about.
Okay.
There's no water that gets used at all. So you can clean that whole tent and wipe it off, fold it up, and skip the drying process.
Okay.
You know,
Cool.
yeah, a big paradigm.
Right. All right. Anything else you want to go over?
I guess a couple of quick points. When you
Okay.
deal with a washing machine, you're able to use a little more aggressive chemical because you're able to rinse it out. You know, Having the ability to rinse all the chemical off that tent surface is huge. Having the ability to wash it and then rinse and then sample the water and say, wow, I don't have all the chemical out. Rinse again, rinse again. You put as many rinses as you want on there with good, clean water. You can only do it with a washing machine, you know?
Right. Yeah, I went to my friend's washer in the middle of the night. It was before my wedding, and I wanted to get the tent clean, so we ran the wash, and it was we ran the wash once, and then we actually rinsed twice. Uh, and that was surprising for me. I didn't know that, but yeah, it's to get all the chemicals off and get all that dirty water out.
It's a huge thing. And I'll wrap it up here, Adam, real quick. Just, I think over 20 years, we've learned a lot about the washing machines and things have changed with the washing machines. People's needs have changed around it. 20 years ago, it was not an accepted practice, and today it very much is. But from a manufacturing standpoint, we've learned a lot. If anybody's got a 10 by 10 space, that's all that's required. you
Right.
know, and anymore, hooking them up super simple. We're to the point now where we've educated that customer before they get the machine so well that when it comes off the truck, within an hour they should be up and they have the ability to be up and running.
Right.
Completely trained, plug it in, super simple to install, and they can actually do it inside or outside.
Now, are these three phase or single phase, or do you have options for both?
You're talking about electric, right?
Yeah.
Single phase electric or three-phase electric. Our machines will run either way.
Okay.
If anybody has, just for somebody not familiar with what that means, a big industrial building like a machine shop or something, typically will have the electric company will give them what they call three-phase power. It's kind of an industrial power.
Right.
All your homes though have single-phase power, or if you're in a light industrial area, you might just only have single phase. But one thing's for sure, if you have electric in your building, you definitely have single phase. You
Right.
may or may not have three phase. So having the ability to a machine that's going to be able to run on either is going to be important for you.
Right. Yeah, I have a big warehouse, but I'm only single phase here, so that would be
Yeah,
important if I ever got one to be able to actually use it.
yeah,
Okay, so it
exactly.
runs on single phase. Good. Um, a little bit beyond these tent washers, I've seen that you guys have tent dryers, and if you've got flat, heater panels, you got tent washers for that too, right?
We do. We absolutely do. We've got a big tumbler dryer for drying. We've got a dryer that is like when you dry your hands anymore. They got these big air knives that dry your hands. You drag them
Right.
through there. A big version of that for drying the flat panel stuff. So Those are really good for people who are limited in their space. They just can't hang things up. Maybe the space costs too much or just not available, or some reason they're locked. Because you can control the amount of time it takes to get them dry. You
Right.
know, you might say, I need them dry enough to pack away for a year. Well, we know it's going to take X amount of time, but it's a fixed amount of time, no matter if it's raining outside or not. If you're hanging them in the ceiling and it's raining outside, it's going to take you a bit more to dry them. So a mechanical dryer is a good option for those who need control over their drying times and have a very limited space.
Right. Um, if anyone needs their tents washed, are they able to contact you guys and you guys can send them to, companies that are near them? Do you have like a list, a resource list for people
We
to,
totally do.
yeah,
We totally do. Just contact us, info at Teeco Solutions or service at Teeco Solutions. We have a list that we send out. If there's any of our customers out there that want to be on that list, just call us. We put you on the list. But at this point, there's over 400 machines across the country, so there's probably one close to you. You know,
right. That's a lot of people don't know that. They think they gotta just do it by hand, but you can spend some money and send it to one of the companies that owns a washer, and they'll charge you a certain amount per square foot, but you'll get a nice clean tent back a lot of times cheaper than it is going to cost you to do it by hand.
absolutely. And even if you do it once a year, that's a good thing. I would invite you to, if you wanted to test it out, you've never done it before, give your local guy one of your nastiest tents, maybe one you don't rent out anymore, right? And you think there's no way that I could rent this out again. Give them the money they want and challenge them, to get it clean and see the results for yourself. Start
Right.
there.
Yeah, it's a
You
good
know,
idea because then you're taking a tent which was making you no money. Now it's good again. And then you'll be surprised. I was very surprised when I cleaned my wedding tent before my wedding. 2 weeks earlier than that, it came down wet. And when we opened it, it was nasty. And then we put it in that tent washer, came out, put it up. It was looked brand new again.
yeah. One of the greatest moments for me in the whole selling of a wash machine is when we're able to talk to the clients 6 or 9 months later. You know, they're always, yeah, we saved them the labor and we did all that. But the biggest thing that they're most excited about after they've had it up and running and they see the labor savings is the fact that they brought those old tents back.
Right.
Every time I hear the same story. We had a tent back there. We never rent it out anymore. Somebody barbecued underneath it 15 years ago. I'm actually able to make that a B grade tent again or an A grade tent again. So they have a certain amount of inventory that they're able to either bring back to life, or maybe it was a B or C grade that they're able to bring back to A grade.
Right.
And they really start to see that how they can control their capital and use their existing inventory a lot more effective. It lasts. They'll add years to their life of their tent top. It'll stay A grade a lot longer. And once they start seeing that, experiencing and they call me to share that, that's an exciting moment for me.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome to be able to you not have to spend as much money every 3 years buying new tent tops because yours went to crap.
Yeah, and you can take that money and you can spend it on, if you want to expand your business, buy more tent tops, right?
Right.
So you're buying tents to really keep up with a growing business, but you can do it in a controlled sense,
Right.
you know, which is
Well,
which is a lot better than always looking at the busy time and saying, "Wow, there's a pile of tents over there too dirty for me to use. I can't use those." That's a pile of money sitting there. You
yeah,
know, it really is.
that's a good way to look at it.
Not
A pile
working
of
for
money sitting there.
you. Okay.
But
The pile of money's not working for you.
okay. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'll leave the link to Teeco Solutions down in the description and to your YouTube channel as well.
Hey, thank you very much, Adam. Appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you very much.